I'm with Asha Jadeja Motwani, a venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley in the US. In her previous incarnation, Asha was an international relations scholar at Stanford University and now also runs the family Motwani Foundation, which does a lot of philanthropic work in India and the US. Welcome, Asha Jadeja, to ThePrint.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And today we're talking about the India-US relationship, but in a slightly different way. We're going to talk about the very, very unfortunate deaths of Indian origin people, also of Indian students in the US these last few weeks. As many as 7 people have been killed, some of them race crimes very openly. The police in some of these states have acknowledged that in the US. Ms. Jadeja, I'm going to actually do a roll call, if you like, of these 7 deaths, of these very unfortunate victims who have fallen prey to some of these hate crimes. Some we don't know whether they were all hate crimes or not. But if you give me a second, I'd just like to read out the names of these people who were killed. Late last week in Alexandria, which is in Virginia, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C., Vivek Taneja was attacked. This was on the 2nd of February, and the police reached the assault scene at 2 a.m. and found that he had suffered life-threatening injuries, and then he very unfortunately passed away. Prior to that, a young student by the name of Syed Mazhar Ali in Chicago was attacked by robbers. A 25-year-old Mr. Mazhar Ali. Okay, I'm going to say this again. Prior to that, Syed Mazhar Ali, an Indian student, was attacked by robbers in Chicago. His wife in India has appealed to the Ministry of External Affairs for help for her husband, and it is believed that help is on its way, in the sense that he is hopefully getting good medical treatment, and then the Indian embassy is taking care of him. Before that, another Indian student, Vivek Seni, was fatally attacked in Georgia by a homeless drug addict. And it is believed that Vivek actually was reaching out to this drug addict, or alleged drug addict, and then he was attacked by him. Prior to that, Shreyas Reddy, only 19 years old, a student at the Lindner School of Business in Ohio, was found dead. Local authorities are ruling out foul play, but this is another really unfortunate incident that took place. Then there is Samir Kamath, a 23-year-old Indian-American student at Purdue University. He was found dead in a nature preserve in Indiana on the 5th of February. And another Indian student, Neil Acharya, also at Purdue University in Indiana, was confirmed dead days after he was reported missing on the 28th of January. And Akul B. Dhawan, an 18-year-old student at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, was found dead also in January with signs of hypothermia. Now, Ms. Jadeja, some of these deaths are clearly, some of these people are victims of race hate. Some of them, the authorities, like I said, are ruling out foul play. But I'd like to ask you, as someone of Indian origin who works and is very deeply connected with India, how do you explain what's going on?
Jyoti, it's difficult to explain this phenomenon right now. Still, there's investigation going on, and I think most of these projects, most of the sad cases, it's going on. But I think there are two. I'm guessing right now that there are 2 or 3 factors that that inform what might be happening. One is that, one is something very similar to what's happening in Silicon Valley. There is a general buzz and sort of gossip and rumor and other stuff going on here in the Bay Area, for example, where people talk about Indian Americans as being, hyper wealthy and having too much, a lot of gold jewelry and stuff like that at home. So we've had a spate of burglaries in Silicon Valley, especially in Sunnyvale and Santa Clara and so on, where we have a lot of Indian population there. Mm-hmm. So we've had, people breaking into Indian homes, looking for jewelry And it is true that Indians go around wearing gold, and most Indian women do have gold jewelry that you're wearing, or it is visible.
Right.
So that's one thing. Second thing I'm guessing right now that might be going on is also that there are a lot of students who are coming from India very raw. They are not familiar with the child who died, the student who died from hypothermia.
Yeah.
There, I'm guessing right now that people are coming ill prepared for the brutal weathers which are there in the Midwest and on the East Coast, and people think that they can wing it with a jacket or a sweater, but if you get lost while hiking, and in America there's an obsession with hiking.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody goes hiking. It's very possible, and I have myself experienced, it's very easy to get lost on these hiking trails.
Mm-hmm.
So the gentleman who died from hypothermia is probably a sad case of somebody, veering off the hiking trail. But there is another context that I want to bring to your attention and to the attention of your viewers, which is important for people to have on your radar, which is that there are two strands of polarization that are going on in academia right
Mm-hmm.
now, in US academia, which have been amplified 10 times by the Middle East war. One strand is something called diversity, equity, inclusion movement.
Mm-hmm.
That movement, the DEI movement, has been around for over, especially it actually really got accelerated after the death of George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
a black man who was killed by white policemen. And after that, the DEI movement really took off. What's happening in the DEI movement is
Mm-hmm.
that it has become quite surprisingly, it has aligned two groups which we were not expecting. One is the Black Americans, of course, through the Black Lives Matter, and the second one is the Islamic group in the US, which has also become very closely aligned with the Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay.
And so there has been this explosion of literature, of research, white papers, teaching assistantships that have been happening in the US around this whole matter of Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
And this has caused a lot of discomfort for the Jewish students. There is a lot of anti-Semitism going on. And the third thing that's happening is there is a huge amount of funding. We're talking about $8 billion of funding that has come in from Islamic countries, especially from Qatar. And this has been all over the media. Everybody, it's all there. The Qatari funding has actually been implicated many times in the matter of anti-Semitism. There
Mm-hmm.
has been a lot of that funding has been diverted towards Jewish, sort of complaining about the Jewish lobby in the US. And I'm sure you've all seen how polarized the US campuses are now
Yeah.
about this whole Israel Hamas war.
That's cool. Yeah.
And it has really, we have never seen this before. It has polarized the Jewish and the Muslim students like never before. It's very disturbing. But I think what's happening is, in that movement, in this unfortunate soup of polarization that's going on, we have started seeing attacks on Hindu students. And this, I'm not sure why.
Not
I
just
mean,
Hindu students, Ashaji. I think there are both Hindu and Muslims, right? Because
no,
Syed
but in
Ali is clearly
yes,
Muslim
yes,
from
yes,
Hyderabad.
yes, that's true. Thank God he wasn't killed. But
Yes,
uh,
absolutely.
but in terms of sheer data and the numbers, and he was probably mistaken to be an Indian student. I mean, if somebody attacked him, it was probably somebody who thought he was an Indian student. But there has been, you know, many attacks actually that have been happening on Hindu students, and I think part of that arises from this idea that the Hindu population in the US is doing unusually well. And it is the highest income group, even if one goes by the Pew study of sort of incomes by religious groups, sort of ethnic groups and religious groups. And there's a generally well established conversation in the US about Hindus doing well. And Hindus being the new, in fact, the term that disturbs me personally is this term called white adjacent. So we are often called white adjacent. We are told that we don't come under the minorities. We don't count as brown people. We don't count as minorities. We count as white adjacent, sort of immigrant group that is doing unusually well. So we have been under a lot of scrutiny, and there is a lot of, I think there are a lot of attacks coming on the Indian students from the usual suspects and I'm talking especially about the left. And by the left, I particularly mean the Marxists who tend to divide the US sort of, in fact, in any of their study groups, they divide them between the oppressor and the oppressed. So the
Yeah,
oppressor,
go ahead. Yeah.
yes. No, continue. If you want to ask me a
No,
question
I was
about,
just no. I just had a couple of remarks and a couple of
yeah.
questions. The first is that I'm not sure whether U.S. surveys and studies are identifying these people or these Indians, both Indian origin as well as Indians, whether just working there or studying there, as Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Jewish. But I imagine that they would be identifying them as Indian or brown or whatever color. So in that
No,
sense,
I'll just
yeah,
respond to that for a second.
go
So
ahead.
there has been a spate of caste bills. And that's the reason we have data now. We didn't have this data till now. Nobody thought of us as Hindu, Muslim, or Christian. Indians were generally seen as Indians. But
Okay.
because of the caste bills that have been, and that battle has been brewing now for a year, and it's a harrowing battle. The caste bills are a harrowing battle for all of us. And I'll tell you more about it as we proceed.
So
But
why
go
don't you
on.
tell us about a little bit about these caste bills right away?
So the caste bills basically are saying that, look, all these people who are coming in from, all the Hindus actually, who are coming in from India, they're bringing caste with them. This is a bad sort of a, social cultural element to Indians. When they come to Hindus, especially, and when they come here, they might be practicing caste. So we started looking into it, right? Because we've all been here for like 40 years and we've never seen this before. I've never run into somebody who's, anybody has ever checked with me what my caste is, or if I've been hiring engineers. I've never, ever sort of said, oh, is this a lower caste or an upper caste? So we started digging into it and saying, where is this coming from?
Mhm.
And apparently, there are two factors where there might be some truth to this whole story. And that truth is with there's a group that there's a Sikh group in California. It's called the Ramdasyas or Ramdasya, right?
Yeah.
That's the word,
Yes, the
So
Ramdas, yes.
the Ramdasyas apparently were told not to enter one particular Gurudwara.
Yeah,
And
because
that,
they're allegedly, even here in Punjab, the Ramdasyas are allegedly of lower caste, which is why
correct,
they were lower caste Hindus who converted to Sikhism,
right,
in the time.
right.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that it's because of that particular lawsuit. So the Ramdasyas filed a lawsuit against the regular Gurudwara and said, look, we are being, barred from this, or we are feeling excluded from this because of us being a lower caste. And then there was another case where a bunch of Nepali Dalits uh, basically said, look, we were discriminated against by this upper caste Nepali gentleman, and then this whole thing blew up, and it sort of went viral, and everybody said. So I think there were these sort of random arbitrary cases that happened across the U.S., one or two, and those are what sparked off this caste bill. And the worst, I mean, I would say the most egregious one was the one in California, which
Mhm.
said all Hindus are casteist and they are bringing caste with them from India. And the reason they have got into these engineering, these tech companies, is because they are practicing caste. And we had to fight it tooth and nail, and we won actually. The governor, California governor, overturned the caste bill. So I have a feeling that the reason there is some data now emerging I don't know if it is Pew, but I do know that Carnegie Endowment for Peace has data by caste and by, the Hindus and Muslims and so on. And now there is also general conversation going on, right, about Muslims also, because the Hindus are saying, look, it's not just us. We are saying even the Muslims might be practicing caste, which is the Pasmandas and the, XYZ.
Yeah.
And so there are studies now coming out. People are funding them. There is a little bit of work going on. People are saying, look, let's collect data first before we point fingers at anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But why are we talking about this caste?
No,
Okay,
so
no.
the
Yeah,
question
so
is that when somebody is attacked, they're not looking at his or her caste, right? They're
correct.
not saying
Yes,
that
they are
you're
not.
Hindu or you're of a certain caste, that's why I'm attacking you. It's,
No,
I mean,
it is
perhaps
seen.
it's because of your color that you're being
It
attacked.
is.
And
Yeah,
Vivek
well,
Taneja, for
color.
example, is not even Indian. He's of Indian origin. So I'm just
Correct.
wondering whether these are being conflicted now because of the color of
Yes,
that we have.
definitely. There's confusion. I mean, listen, if one guy got killed because of a homeless man, of course. I mean, I'm assuming right now that the homeless guy didn't have a clue. All he probably heard about was that Indians are wealthy. Or in fact, he could have even died because the homeless man attacked this gentleman and killed him, I think.
Yeah.
It could also simply be that he didn't even think it was Indian. It was just a homeless man who was high on drugs or something, and somebody tried to help him, and this man might have, who knows, I mean, right, we just don't know that if it was a hate crime. So I think, I mean, I actually think that these hate crimes may not be fully associated with religion or caste or anything like that, but they might be related to the fact that Indians are seen as wealthy. So
Mm.
definitely mugging an Indian could come up with, you could get a, who knows, I mean, getting somebody's wallet, they might so I have a feeling that there might be some of that going on. And again, as I said, the second thing that's going on is this diversity, equity, inclusion movement, where Indians are seen as white adjacent.
So
And
that's
that's,
my other question. Explain
yeah.
this phrase to us. White adjacent, what does that mean? Are we
Right. So
Go ahead.
it actually, the white adjacent phrase or label actually arose from academia. So it wasn't really just, it wasn't the US government. It wasn't, the Indians have been seen in the United States as the model minority. We have been emulated. We've been, we are loved. We are, people copy us. People say, look, this is a model minority. We should be like this. I mean, this is how minorities integrate into a new country like the US, and the Indians are doing a good job. Why can't everybody else? So sometimes there is that going on. But I think what I'm saying about the white adjacent is that in academia, and especially with a couple of Indian professors, so there's one lady called Ajanta Subramanian,
Mhm.
whose research has been on caste and Hinduism, and so she used to be at Harvard. I think she's left now, and she's probably at CUNY in on the East Coast also. But Ajanta Subramanian's research was on caste and on the privilege, on the fact that all the Indians who are coming here, and 99% of us are, Hindu, right? So let's face it, there's a small percentage which is Christian or Muslim. So the Ajanta's research basically showed that these people who are coming from, first of all, Indians who are coming from the US, from India into the US, are typically from elite schools. They are typically from IITs, and they are from, in fact, her book was called The Caste of Merit.
Mhm.
It actually created a huge bunch of drama in academic circles, because people said, you cannot pin down the success of IITians to their caste. It's but again, the truth of the matter is that most of the IITians who are here are upper caste,
Mhm.
right? There are very few Dalits here. So Ajanta's work actually created an uproar, and everybody started looking into it, and then there was a bunch of other studies that came out, which was kind of started talking about the fact that Hindus are not a minority. We are not black-skinned minority who is an immigrant group who should be given any special privileges. And strangely, a lot of this were Indian professors. There was another guy called Rohit Chopra, who was here in Santa Clara University in the Bay Area. His work also was about the fact that Hindus should not be given any special privilege, which we never have been given actually. But the white adjacent title came from two or three of these professors.
Mhm.
And then it became mainstream, and it got conflated with caste situation, of the Ramdasyas and so on. And I mean, it's kind of died down also. But last year, it had really assumed massive proportions because of the bill being on the desk of California Governor Gavin Newsom, who overturned it. So there was a lot of drama around it.
So white adjacent would mean that near adjacent to the white community, right? Or near the white community. So the Indian community being given or being accorded the same kind of privilege, although, like you said, the Indians have earned it rather than have inherited it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, and I think no, but I guess it's also rooted in in data about incomes, and the fact of the matter is that the Indian immigrant group, ethnic group as ethnicity, and this might be coming even from U.S. Census, is by far the highest income group, right? I mean, it's 2 or 3 times the income of
Right.
median income. So it's a very high income group, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that people are coming here through technology channels. We don't have Indians, for example, walking across the border. Not many. There are some
You
who
do
have
have,
started
you
trekking.
do have,
There are some, yes.
no, you've
There
had
has there
people who've
are some
died in the cold, who have frozen. This family of people from Gujarat and from
Canadians.
elsewhere,
Yes, the Canadians
from
did.
via Canada when they come. But my question, I have 2 questions here. The first is that now there's a big immigration debate unfolding in the US, right? And this has been going on for some years, even when Trump was president, and now he's back again as his key contender of the Republicans.
Yes.
So does this tap into that debate, into the immigration debate? And now you read, in fact, Fareed Zakaria also had a big piece on immigration. So I want to know what you think. Does this alleged, the alleged hate crimes, or as you say, this perception of Indians being so wealthy, how does this tap into this debate?
Yeah, no, you're spot on about that. That there is, as America heads towards the elections, first of all, there's massive polarization, as you know, right, between the Republicans and the Democrats, blue America, red America. And the polarization is not just about, about the local economy and so on, but it is about immigration. And it is about the fact that when people are walking across the border, are they stealing American jobs? Because the illegal immigrants actually have a right to vote, and their children have a right to equal education in public schools and free education. So there is a resentment there because the cost of this year it was 2 million people walking in. So the cost of that is what is beginning to rankle a lot of people in the urban areas now, and even rural areas, but urban areas mostly, because this is where the immigrants are landing. So you will find people, camping out on the streets of San Francisco or New York City, Los Angeles, San Diego, and so they're much more visible, and you can feel the pressure, where there's competition not just for jobs but also for school spaces. So in New York City, for example, there is, you have children that immigrant children who they have to be in school, otherwise it's illegal. So even those who don't have a status get free schooling in New York City, for example. That's creating pressure on the system, and it's creating, but absolutely. And I'm dreading, what's going to happen if Trump gets a mic now and he starts talking about this stuff. It's going to be even worse because he's made such awful sounds in the past about, about immigrants.
Yeah.
So so it's a scary time ahead.
So explain to me also, how is this a political issue in the sense, now the question is that Indians of both of Indian origin, as well as, so basically Indians who've been coming to the US over the last 50 or 60 years, and I'm not going to go back to 100 years, but say in the last 50 or 60 years. Now these people have assimilated, they've become US citizens, so they are of Indian origin. They're no longer Indian in that sense, right? Now,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
asking, they are both divided between the Democrats and the Republicans, so which means that they're either left of center or right of center. So how does this debate of the Indians now being targeted, both of Indian origin as well as of Indian, how does this tap into the Democrat-Republican divide? Are the Democrats more willing to accept immigration and say that, yes, everybody must be given a fair chance because of the wars that are being fought in my part of the world? And the Indian community on the Republican side, how do they look at it?
So I think there is a much more of an acceptance of immigrants by Democrats. A lot of this, in fact, a lot of border issue right now that's going on has a lot of sort of heartache within the Republican community because they don't want these people coming in.
Right.
But the Democrats have been actually quite open to it. Biden administration has been lax on clamping down on humanitarian grounds. We have also seen some some signs of these immigrants signing up as voters. And so this is a tricky issue, and immigrants typically tend to be voting Democratic. So there is there is that issue there. On the Republican side, there would be more of a pushback against immigrants. In general, I would say that's not against Indians, simply because we are seen as mostly as people who are coming into the tech or engineering, medical field. People see us, especially and Republicans who, by the way, are in the red states, who are in the rural parts of America. These guys are actually seeing, doctors there. The medical community in rural America is overwhelmingly Indian. And so a lot of these people are seeing Indians as a good to have, as people that are highly desirable, they're highly qualified. And even on the Republican side, I think the pushback against immigrants would be for those who are walking in across the border, who are Hispanics and people coming from the south of the border. There isn't that much immigration, illegal immigration coming in from Canada yet, but significant numbers from the south. And
So
there it is.
Indian Americans, even in the Republican camp, they would be pro-immigration, or would they not be pro-immigration?
You mean when you refer to immigration, are you referring general immigration or Indian immigration?
Well, both. Both.
No, I think Indian Americans who are in the Republican Party are fine. They understand the value of having Indians here, the value of having technically qualified staff that has come in legally is a big deal. It's in the rural areas where there is lack of knowledge, there is lack of information, and ignorance is what is driving this dislike of immigrants, brown people in general. And people don't distinguish between, is this brown person a Mexican, or is it an Indian, or what? I mean, now I think people are much better informed. But 10 years ago, or 20, or when I came, which is 40 years ago, almost 35 years ago, I would be seen as a Mexican once in a while.
Right.
Even in Los Angeles. So I think it's ignorance that is the problem. Indians in general are happy with other Indians coming in. I think it's a good thing that we have
But
full
are they
support.
happy with? But are they happy with general immigration? Just like they believe that.
Totally.
Yes.
Not only that, they're fighting for it. They're introducing bills in the Congress, which is saying spouses should be allowed in, children should be allowed in, and these are all through legal channels. And that
But what about Syrians, Afghans, Iraqis? Are Indian Americans okay with these kind of immigrations that take place?
I think Indian Americans don't have an opinion on that. I think they stay out of that. Because remember, the Muslim issue is it's a hot iron issue here, especially when Trump is in charge. I mean, if you remember, he had banned Muslim immigrants at one point, or immigration from Muslim countries. Sorry,
Yeah, several Muslim countries. Yeah.
several Muslims. So it is a bit of an issue. And but Indian Americans, whether they're Hindu or Muslim, have nothing to really, they don't have an opinion on this. They care about making sure that our relatives are coming in fast, that the H-1B visas are not taking so long, green cards are handed out faster, people get citizenship faster. And that's what we are all trying to do. And that's the kind of influence that we are trying to wield even in Washington, D.C.
So to circle back to these 7 unfortunate victims, now, would you say, Ms. Jadeja, that is hate crime on the rise? You referred to George Floyd at the beginning of this discussion. So you do have a lot of prejudice, even now, against the Black community in the US,
True.
in some states more than in the others. But would you say that because of the color of our skin is darker, and that this is perhaps being conflated with the Black community, so it's actually not white adjacent, it's Black adjacent too?
No. Unfortunately, look, I think if we Indians were ever placed in that same basket or the same group as blacks, it would privilege us. I actually do agree that we are white adjacent. It would privilege us even more. We are a privileged group. There is no doubt about it. And we,
Some of you may be privileged, but a lot of you may not be privileged.
no.
Like the poorer Indians are not, because of their skin color, darker, are not, they like, I mean, you yourself, for example, I mean, sorry to be personal, but you are fair. But I'm sure a lot of the Indians a lot of these young men who have been unfortunate victims because they are darker and they seem to be darker, and therefore they may seem to be more Black adjacent or Mexican adjacent, or, Hispanic adjacent, shall we say. So therefore, they are
perhaps
targeted much more.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I mean, listen, race. Race is an issue in America, right? For many years now, it's a hot button issue, and dark-skinned people in general were once upon a time, kind of people would say, oh, what's the deal? We exotic people or something. I think there was, there was that difference that you could sense that, difference. But I don't think we are seen as the Indians in general are not seen as Black adjacent or Hispanic adjacent and so on. And I think simply because the internet has connected us all. So 30 years ago, before the internet, when people didn't know what was what, I mean, maybe we were mistaken for Mexicans. But now because there is so much visibility of the Indian American diaspora here, right? The Indian American is very visible. There is, for example, you can see people especially in the medical field. The medical field is full of Indian Americans, and you see the best of the best doctors, the beloved doctors in even rural America are Indian. So there is a general good feeling about this, the Indian immigration here, Indian immigrants here. Then, of course, there is the tech people. So the tech, in the valley, it's full of Indians. Everybody has heard of these, fantastic stories of Indians being, there being at least one founder, Indian founder in many of the startups, for example. And so there are these stories that, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, New York Times would be writing about. And so there is a general feeling that overall, even though there may be taxi drivers and there may be people who are cooks and so on, but overall, that sense is that, look, Indians are a very desirable immigrant community. And and I think.
So does this
Yeah.
also expand, the Indian, desirable Indian, for example? Would you also say that the Pakistani or the Sri Lankan or the Bangladeshi and the Nepali, meaning the South Asian, do these other nationalities also get conflated with the desirable Indian?
Yes, they are often mistaken as Indian, and I think overall it's a good thing. I think all the people I know from Bangladesh and Pakistan are are as desirable as anybody else as Indians. They are also very very accomplished. They've done well. They're good members of the community. So you don't have, I mean, even Afghans who are here. I know so many Afghans who are here. In general, they are a very well-liked community. They are super educated. They are English speaking, and even if they may be in farming or taxi driving, they are still seen as as a good immigrant community.
So let me ask you, Ms. Jadeja, you're Indian American. You said you went there 35 or 40 years ago. You also said that Indians are now being seen, or increasingly seen, as a model minority or a model immigrant community. So what does that mean? What is it that Indians have done that have given, that the people of America have given them this label?
This, I think, it really has a lot to do with the fact that the Indians who are coming here, especially in the last, especially during the tech boom.
Yeah.
Our software engineers, they're technical people.
They seem
And
to be
so
smart.
they seem to be smart. They are, they're managing IT. You'll again, they're also doctors, right? So even in the rural communities, all you'll find, IT people and the medical community is so Indian. It's so overwhelmingly Indian that in general that gives a very good sort of a sense of about our community within the US. The model minority bit came up, I think, when it actually came up in relation to the Black community. And the Black community was often told that, look, you're saying that you are doing poorly right now because you have been, there's been slavery, and that there is racism even now in the US. But hey, look at these brown people coming from India. And
Mm-hmm.
that conversation, by the way, was very troubling for many of us. It was very uncomfortable for many of us because we didn't want to be scapegoated and used as for finger pointing, and we did. But that was the origin of that conversation, that dialogue and debate that was happening in the U.S., which was to some extent telling the Black community that, hey, don't complain about racism because look at these guys. They've come here against all odds. They've come penniless. Most of us, by the way, myself and Rajiv, we came here penniless, with $500 in our pockets. And, so when, I mean, we just don't want to get into the middle of that domestic political issue, but that's where the roots are, about the model minority label.
That reminds me, Asha ji, of the late 1980s and early 1990s in South Africa, white South Africa. This is before the independence that came in 1994, when the Indian community, which had been sent as slave labor during British colonial times, so have been there for over 100 years, and now have, dug their feet in, put their head down, worked really hard, done very well. And increasingly were being targeted both by the whites as well as by the blacks and caught in the middle in a sense. So
Yes.
but tell me now, in the US, so you have a lot of Indians who are now sort of not just doctors and IT people, but also in politics. I mean, Kamala Harris, of course, is the most visible
Yeah.
person. But how does this tap into both the immigration debate as well as the perception of the Indians?
We are going to see more and more of people of Indian origin now running for politics, running for elections.
But,
And there has been an explosion. I mean, I'm seeing every day, I see like 2 new names of Indians running for
I mean,
Congress.
Vivek Ramaswamy is of course the most public face of that.
Correct. Yeah. Vivek and Nikki Haley, of course, are the
And Nikki
most
Haley, absolutely. Yeah.
visible, but there are many. There's Raja Krishnamurthy, there is Premila Jaipal, there is Ro Khanna from the Bay Area, who is a congressman. There are tons of people that are already. There's Crystal Call, who is running now. She's a Kashmiri Indian. She is running for elections locally. There's a whole bunch of people. So lots and lots of young, I would say second generation Indian Americans who are now running for a seat in the Congress. And that's a very good move because this is the first time in history that Indians have started paying attention to Washington, D.C. Indians have otherwise been isolated. They've been kind of, shy about, poking their noses too much into anything. They'll sit there and do their medical stuff or, IT or software and so on. But now, for the first time, Indians are, especially our children actually, are saying, look, this is not enough. Just being a high income group is not enough. We need to have influence in Washington, D.C. And you'll see more and more of that. When Prime Minister Modi was coming here, Jyoti, I don't know if you know, but there was so much opposition from certain groups about, giving him the red carpet treatment that he got. And it was people like Ro Khanna, Raja Krishnamurthy, and Kamala Harris, and all these people who put their foot down and said, "No, Prime Minister Modi is a head of the world's largest democracy. He has to be accorded the kind of respect and dignity that comes with that kind of a head of state." And sure enough, the Biden White House did everything it could to welcome him with as warmly as they could. So we'll see more of this. I think it's a very good trend. But these
Nikki Haley, of course, good
unfortunate.
Sardani girl. But Vivek Ramaswamy, as black as coal, like
Yes.
you and me. And I'm sorry to to
Yeah,
speak
very
like
dark
this.
skin. That's
But
true.
yeah, and but
Right.
I think that we have to sort of say it as it comes. But what
Yes.
amazes me is when I hear him. Of course, he's now withdrawn from the presidential candidate from his candidature. But he speaks his mind. He's unafraid. He's not
Brilliant.
tiptoeing around the issues.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
says it like it happens, and he's
Yes.
very, very blunt. So,
True.
so I think he doesn't see himself as somebody of Indian origin. He sees himself as an
He,
American, doesn't he?
yes, he does. He does. But he's also a Hindu, and he wears his Hinduism on his sleeve, like Rishi Sunak. You
Does
know,
he? Is he as openly?
as open and proudly so. And he tells them, in fact, many of his, town hall meetings across the U.S. were about the fact that he's not a Christian. And America was asking him, like, if you were president, remember, you are, you would you be able to lead a Christian nation? And you should have heard his answers. I'm sure you ran into some of them, but just brilliant, actually. And he spoke very articulately about his religion, and he said, that's who I am. I won't be surprised if he ends up coming in as a running mate for somebody. We don't know. Keeping fingers crossed that we have that Biden makes it. Right now there is so much uncertainty about his health that I'm not sure.
So circling back, Ms. Jadeja, your last comments on not just these people, but let's focus on them and give them a minute or so of our deepest respects, but also to talk about the future. Do you think that this is going to, put the brakes on, or will impact the perception both of Indians in the U.S. and of Indian families in India who will be afraid of sending their children to the U.S. Saying perhaps that there are all these hate crimes, and why should we send our young kids there,
Mm-hmm.
a place where they are not safe?
Yes, definitely. It's going to have an impact. It's going to, the Indian parents are going to be thinking twice before sending their child to a New York, California kind of places where, who knows, like, Purdue and all these places are in the middle of the US, where it's Purdue is in Indiana, I think.
Yeah.
And these are places where you don't have that much of a mixed population. So we might see a shift in India for sending their children, people wanting their children to be in safer places like Florida, California, New York, where everybody know. I mean, it's just these are big states with lots and lots of immigrants, so it's easier and safer. For the US, it will hit our pocketbooks in the
Mm.
universities, right? Because not having Indian students are the most lucrative form of revenue for American universities. And if that slows down, that's a hit on American university system.
So
So,
perhaps the the US authorities should also reach out and reassure people, both locally as well as, whether it's
yeah.
at the embassy or, and I think that conversation still hasn't taken place, and perhaps it should more publicly.
It might be probably because of this investigation going on. I think once there is a little bit more data, but that's a very good point you are raising. I'm going to bring it up with Ro Khanna. He's our local, representative in Washington, D.C. And I'll make sure that we have Ro speaking about it, specifically address. In fact, we should have had him on this call, on this conversation, Jyoti, maybe next time.
Maybe next time. But thank
Yeah.
you so much, Ms. Jadeja, for speaking so sensitively and, explaining this very sensitive and very controversial issue. Because while we don't talk about it as publicly here in India, but it's at the back of all our minds. And we're wondering what this country is about, which has been so welcoming. With
Mhm.
India and the US have such a good relationship. And then there is this very underlying, very subterranean feeling, and we wonder whether it's anti-Indian or what is it in the first place. But
Mhm.
thank you so much for your time and for explaining this in
Yeah,
such.
no, we will get to the bottom of this. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for
And our
speaking.
prayers are with these families. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you, Jyoti.
Each of
Thank
them.
you.
Thank you so much for speaking to me on the print. Thanks.